For more than 5 decades, Diane Keaton was Hollywood's unstoppable force, witty, stylish, fearless, and unforgettable. She was the woman who could light up a room with a single grin, the actress who redefined what it meant to age in Hollywood, and the icon who seemed immune to time itself. But in October 2025, that illusion shattered. News broke that Diane Keaton had died at the age of 79, and the world fell silent. The headlines said pneumonia, but for fans who had followed her every laugh, her every candid moment, it didn't make sense. Just months earlier, she looked healthy, energetic, alive. So what really happened in those final months, and why did no one see it coming? This isn't a story about rumors or tabloid fantasy. It's about the truth, the real, human story behind the sudden end of a woman who never stopped inspiring the world. Because Diane Keaton's life, even in her final days, was filled with the same mystery, heart, and courage that made her a legend. To understand Diane Keaton's final chapter, you have to go back to where the legend began. From her earliest days, she never fit the Hollywood mold. While others chased glamour, Keaton built an entire career on being unapologetically herself, awkward, funny, sharp, and deeply human. She became the face of something rare in the industry: honesty. Her breakthrough came in The Godfather, where she played Kay Adams, the woman torn between love and morality. But it was Annie Hall that turned her into a cultural phenomenon. The film won her an Academy Award, but it also created a new kind of heroine, one who didn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Diane's quirky fashion, her nervous laugh, and that unmistakable sense of freedom made her instantly iconic. Audiences didn't just watch her, they connected with her. She wasn't playing a character, she was showing them a version of truth that Hollywood rarely allowed. As the years passed, her range only grew wider. She could make you cry in Something's Gotta Give and laugh until your sides hurt in The First Wives Club. Even when surrounded by A-list co-stars, Keaton somehow made every frame hers. She wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, she was authentic, and in an industry obsessed with reinvention, that authenticity made her untouchable. Off-screen, she became just as fascinating. Her eccentric sense of style, the hats, the tailored suits, the androgynous flair, turned her into a fashion symbol decades before it became trendy to be different. Magazines called her unpredictable, directors called her genius. To the public, she was timeless, but those closest to her knew that the very strength that made her so magnetic also came with solitude. Keaton never married, something she once said she didn't regret. She adopted 2 children in her 50s and found meaning in raising them on her own terms. While the world saw a confident, vibrant woman, behind closed doors she was more private than anyone imagined. She once admitted she kept most of her fears to herself, not because she wanted to hide, but because she believed some parts of life should remain hers alone. That duality, the luminous public figure versus the introspective private woman, defined Diane Keaton, and it's why her sudden death hit so hard. To fans, she seemed invincible. To those who truly knew her, that illusion of strength was built on quiet battles she rarely spoke about, but those battles were real, and in the years before her death, they would quietly shape her final story. Before we move on, let's take a moment to honor Diane Keaton, a woman whose grace, wit, and fearless individuality changed Hollywood forever. May her light continue to shine, reminding us all to live boldly, laugh often, and stay true to who we are. And if you want more people to remember her story, her legacy, her laughter, and her courage, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps keep her memory alive and ensures that her light continues to reach others who loved her just as much. Diane Keaton was never afraid to be vulnerable, not on screen, and not in life. Long before Hollywood made authenticity fashionable, she was already living it. She spoke openly about her insecurities, her eating disorder, and her lifelong battle with perfectionism. In her memoir, Then Again, Diane revealed something few people expected, that she had struggled with bulimia for years when she was young. It began in her early 20s, during a time when Hollywood's beauty standards were impossibly cruel. She described the cycle with brutal honesty, the endless counting of calories, the pressure to stay thin, and the shame that came after every meal. But unlike so many who hide those parts of their lives forever, Keaton confronted it. She didn't romanticize it or turn it into a story of victimhood. She called it what it was, an obsession that nearly consumed her, and a battle she ultimately won. In interviews, she often said that she was lucky to have found recovery through therapy and self-acceptance. "It's not something I'm proud of," she once said, "but it's part of who I was, and you can't change what you don't face." That kind of honesty, quiet, raw, and unfiltered, made people love her even more. As she aged, Diane began to face another invisible battle, her skin. Decades under bright studio lights and years of California sun had taken a toll. In her late 40s, she was diagnosed with basal cell carcinoma, a common but potentially dangerous form of skin cancer. It wasn't a one-time scare. She later revealed that she had multiple spots removed over the years, each a reminder that even the strongest icons are still human. She became an advocate for skin health, often speaking about the importance of sunscreen and regular checkups. But true to her character, she approached it with humor, not fear. In one interview, she joked, "I used to worship the sun. Now I worship SPF 50. Still, behind the jokes there was reflection, a quiet awareness that time was moving faster than she'd ever imagined. In her 70s, she began to talk more about aging, not with sadness, but with curiosity. She once said, "Getting older isn't a failure, it's just another version of being alive." That line captured exactly who she was, never dramatic about the inevitable, always searching for meaning in it. She often credited her children, Dexter and Duke, as her greatest motivation to stay healthy and grounded. Becoming a mother in her 50s had given her a new sense of purpose. She said they helped her see the world in smaller, simpler ways. "They keep me laughing," she once told people. "They remind me what matters." And even as her health challenges appeared behind the scenes, Diane refused to let them define her. She kept working, kept laughing, kept showing up to red carpets in her signature hats and gloves, that mix of eccentricity and grace that no one else could ever replicate. But for all her strength, there were limits even Diane couldn't control. In the years leading up to her passing, those closest to her noticed something subtle, a slowing down, a fragility she'd never shown before. She still smiled for the cameras, but behind closed doors, the pace of her life had begun to change. The woman who once seemed indestructible was beginning to fade, and few realized just how quickly it would happen. For someone who had spent her life under bright lights, Diane Keaton's final months were surprisingly private, almost invisible to the public eye. There were no paparazzi photos of hospital visits, no tabloid headlines about illness, no viral videos of her looking frail or different. She simply slipped out of the spotlight, quietly and gracefully, just as she had lived most of her personal life. Friends later said the change came very suddenly. One day, she was still laughing, walking her dog, and posting playful clips online. The next, the tone around her became quieter, subtle, but noticeable. Those close to her described her health as declining faster than anyone expected. But Diane, being Diane, didn't want sympathy. She never liked pity, and she hated attention that came from pain. So she did what she had always done best. She smiled through it. Her final public appearance, months before her passing, showed no sign of frailty. Dressed in her signature wide-brimmed hat and layered neutral tones, she looked like herself, radiant, eccentric, and calm. But to those who truly knew her, there was something different in her eyes, a softness, almost as if she understood what was coming. When friends and colleagues were later asked about that period, the same word kept coming up: private. Diane had always guarded her personal life, but in those last months, that instinct became even stronger. It wasn't secrecy, it was dignity. She wanted her final chapter to belong to her and her family, not the world. Behind the scenes, a small circle of loved ones reportedly took turns helping her through the illness that at the time few knew was growing worse. Some described her as peaceful, even during the hardest days. There were no public updates, no press statements, no hospital leaks, just quiet care, laughter where possible, and the kind of warmth that comes only from family. And yet, even as her body weakened, her sense of humor never disappeared. In one of her last text exchanges, a close friend recalled Diane joking about her legacy. "If people remember the hats, I guess I did something right." It was classic Keaton, humble, sharp, and funny to the end. The world would only learn how serious things had become after it was already over. On October 11, 2025, the news broke that Diane Keaton had passed away at the age of 79. The announcement shocked everyone, not because of her age, but because no one saw it coming. For decades, she had seemed timeless. To fans, she wasn't supposed to fade, she was supposed to live forever, like the characters she made famous. But behind that image of strength, her health had quietly been slipping away. As tributes began flooding social media, the question lingered everywhere. What really happened to Diane Keaton in those final months? And soon, her family would step forward to answer, not with drama or speculation, but with truth. When the official statement from Diane Keaton's family arrived, it was brief, respectful, and heartbreakingly simple. They confirmed that the Academy Award-winning actress had passed away on October 11, 2025, at her home in Los Angeles. The cause of death, they said, was bacterial pneumonia, a common but serious infection that can turn deadly, especially in older adults. It wasn't sudden in a single moment, but it progressed faster than anyone had imagined. The family made it clear that Diane's passing was peaceful, surrounded by loved ones, and that she had received excellent care in her final days. There were no hidden scandals, no dramatic twist, just a quiet goodbye from a woman who had spent a lifetime giving so much of herself to others. A few days later, her official death certificate confirmed the same details: bacterial pneumonia as the sole cause, no underlying conditions listed. The certificate also noted that she had been cremated on October 14th, 3 days after her passing. Her ashes were returned to her family in a private ceremony. Away from the cameras and public attention she had long learned to keep at a distance. It was a reminder that even in death, Diane Keaton remained true to herself, elegant, understated, and deeply private. Doctors explained that bacterial pneumonia can develop quietly, especially in someone who hides their discomfort or avoids seeking attention until it's too late. Symptoms can start as something ordinary: fatigue, a lingering cough, maybe a low fever, and then escalate rapidly. In older adults, it can overwhelm the lungs in just a few days. That knowledge made her final months all the more heartbreaking. The people who loved her might never have realized just how serious it had become until those final days. When the news broke, tributes poured in from around the world. Fans, filmmakers, and actors shared the same sentiment: shock. Because until the very end, Diane had seemed vibrant and alive, posting on Instagram, walking her dog, and staying active in small creative projects. Her last post, shared in April 2025, showed her sitting in her backyard with her dog Reggie, the California sunlight glowing around them. The caption was simple: a perfect day to be outside. It became her final message to the world: ordinary, peaceful, and beautiful. The post was flooded with comments from fans after her passing, many writing that they couldn't believe this was the same woman they had just seen months ago, smiling, happy, and full of life. That contrast between the warmth of that last image and the suddenness of her death gave her story a haunting kind of serenity. She had always lived by the idea that some things are meant to remain private, and she carried that philosophy to the very end. No public decline, no spectacle, just a life quietly concluding the way it was lived, gracefully. The family's final statement thanked fans for their outpouring of love and support. They asked that anyone wishing to honor Diane do so not with flowers but with compassion, by donating to animal shelters or food banks, two causes she had championed for years. It was a gesture that perfectly reflected her heart. Even in her absence, she found a way to help others. For the public, the mystery of how Diane Keaton died had finally been answered. But for many, the real question was why it happened so fast. How could someone so full of energy fade away in a matter of months? And that's where the story takes a deeper turn, into the speculation, the reflections, and the quiet questions left behind. When news of Diane Keaton's death first broke, confusion spread almost as fast as grief. Fans across social media began asking the same question: how could this happen so suddenly? She hadn't been seen in public struggling, she hadn't canceled any major commitments, and just a few months earlier, she looked perfectly healthy. The suddenness created a vacuum, and in that silence, speculation began to grow. Some fans wondered whether she had been quietly battling another illness. Others questioned if stress or exhaustion had weakened her immune system. But through all the noise, her family never entertained the rumors. They stayed silent, not out of secrecy, but out of respect. Those who knew Diane best understood that she valued privacy above all else. She wasn't hiding from anyone. She simply didn't believe her pain belonged to the public. It was the same philosophy that had guided her entire career, the belief that mystery wasn't something to be explained, but something to be protected. For decades, that mystery made her fascinating. She was never a celebrity who overshared or chased attention. Even in an age where every moment is broadcast online, Diane stayed different. Her Instagram wasn't about fame, it was about small joys. Her dog, her garden, her favorite trees, her quiet humor about aging. Her final posts reflected that same tone: peaceful, funny, almost meditative, and that's what made her passing even harder to accept. There was no warning, no goodbye, just a sudden silent absence from someone who had been part of people's lives for generations. Reporters described the public reaction as stunned disbelief. Hollywood veterans spoke about her as if she were still present, because in a way she always would be. Al Pacino, her longtime friend and Godfather co-star, called her one of the bravest souls he'd ever met. She was pure light, he said. No ego, no act, just truth. Others, like director Nancy Meyers, who worked with her on Something's Gotta Give, described her as an artist who made being human look effortless. Still, the whispers didn't disappear overnight. Whenever a beloved public figure dies unexpectedly, people look for meaning, a reason, a pattern, something that makes it make sense. But sometimes, there isn't one. Sometimes, it's just the fragility of life reminding us how delicate everything really is. In Diane's case, that uncertainty only deepened her legend, because even in her final act, she managed to do what she'd always done, remain a little mysterious. She didn't let the world see her weakness. She didn't turn her illness into a spectacle. She chose grace over drama, peace over publicity, and dignity over attention. For many of her fans, that was the final lesson she left behind, that not everything needs to be explained. Some things are meant to stay quiet. Some goodbyes are whispered, not announced. And yet, even as the world tried to move on, her presence lingered everywhere. In film, in fashion, in the very idea that aging could be stylish and strength could be soft. Her life had always been about duality, control and chaos, laughter and pain, confidence and vulnerability. And maybe in the end, that was her greatest truth, that beauty exists in contrast. As the initial shock faded, something else took its place: reflection. People stopped speculating and started remembering. They revisited her old interviews, her films, her humor, her strange, infectious laughter. And what they found wasn't scandal or mystery, it was inspiration. In the days that followed Diane Keaton's passing, tributes flooded the world like a wave of shared gratitude. Actors, directors, and fans all seemed to say the same thing, that Diane wasn't just a performer, she was a feeling. Her presence had shaped entire generations of film lovers, and her authenticity had quietly rewritten what it meant to grow old in Hollywood. For over 50 years, she defied every rule the industry tried to give her. She refused to be anyone's version of beautiful but her own. She wore men's suits on red carpets when everyone else wore sequins. She made eccentricity elegant and individuality powerful. But beyond the hats and humor, her real legacy lived in her courage, the way she turned imperfection into art. You can see her influence everywhere today, in every actress who chooses to age naturally, in every film that celebrates honesty over glamour, in every woman who dares to be different, even when the world tells her not to. Diane Keaton didn't just act, she changed perception. She made real interesting again. Her co-stars often described her as magnetic, not because she tried to be, but because she couldn't help it. Steve Martin once said, "Diane had this incredible ability to make you forget she was acting. You always felt like you were just talking to her, the real her." That was her superpower, a rare kind of transparency wrapped in mystery. But her legacy wasn't confined to Hollywood. Away from the cameras, Diane dedicated much of her later life to causes that reflected her deepest values. She quietly supported organizations that helped the unhoused, donated to animal shelters, and even rescued dogs herself. She once said that animals gave her the kind of loyalty Hollywood never could. That quote stayed with many. It summed up her entire philosophy on life. Simple, grounded, sincere. Her family's final message to the public reflected that same spirit. They asked fans not to send flowers, but to make a small act of kindness in her name. It didn't matter what. Feed someone in need, help an animal, or just make someone smile. It was Diane's kind of legacy, love that multiplies quietly. As tributes continued to pour in, fans started rewatching her films, rediscovering the moments that had once made them laugh, cry, and believe in something beautiful again. From Annie Hall's offbeat charm to the emotional strength of Something's Gotta Give, her performances now carried a different weight. They felt like part of a goodbye she never had to say, and yet despite her passing, Diane Keaton's presence somehow still feels alive. In every smile that doesn't apologize for its wrinkles, in every creative soul who chooses individuality over imitation, in every quiet moment where someone dares to laugh at themselves, even when life feels heavy. That's the beauty of an artist like Diane. She never disappears, she just changes form. Her laughter, her elegance, her defiance, they linger in the culture she helped build. Her story reminds us that even icons are mortal, but legacy is not. It reminds us that strength doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. and that maybe the greatest way to live is to do what Diane did all along: to love deeply, to laugh often, and to never be afraid of being different. Diane Keaton's story isn't just about her death, it's about her life. A life filled with courage, imperfection, beauty, and truth. She faced her battles quietly, loved fiercely, and left behind a world that will forever be brighter because she walked through it. So before this story ends, let's take one last moment to remember her, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because some people leave the stage, and others, like Diane, leave a light that never fades. If you want more people to see and remember her story, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps keep her legacy alive and reminds the world that authenticity never goes out of style. May Diane Keaton rest in peace, forever surrounded by the love, laughter, and light she gave so freely to others.